Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Eddie was explaining about some of the things that we did when we were in college. You know, I studied and chased girls and did sports, and not in that order. So I just wanted to let you know there. So the reason I'm here is fear, and I'm talking about fear in the fact that we all have attributes inside me to overcome this type of fear. And you know, fear can span from fear of success, fear of failure, fear of reconciliation, abandonment, divorce, death, spiders, maybe even zombies. But my biggest fear when I was a kid was a horrific affliction called chlorophobia. Right? Fear of clowns? A lot of people can relate to that. So I went to the dentist, and I used to, in my baby teeth, I had a lot of cavities. And every time that the dentist would drill in for the cavity, I would look up, and the only thing that I would see is a myriad of pictures of clowns. And it would be the sorrowful clown, the happy clown, the worried clown, the angry clown, the all-around nice guy clown. Well, you know, I didn't want to see any clowns anymore. So in fact, my adult teeth, never a cavity ever again. So, but what have I done with my life when it comes to fear? And now I'm a keynote speaker, and I talk a lot about overcoming different types of fear, but utilizing the attributes that we already have inside us. And I'd like to talk about that in utilizing some people and skills that I've already had and we've already had inside of us and exercise it in public. So we're talking anything from, and I'm an acronym kind of guy, focus, energy, attitude, resilience, and support systems. And utilizing all of those things, and I really didn't realize that I had these attributes inside me. And that chlorophobia, that fear of freaky clowns, was nothing, was dwarfed in comparison of what I had to deal with in college. And in 1988, I was a student, I was a junior, NIU. My injury actually happened about 500 yards away from here. It was over on the railroad trestle. I was with some friends out in the middle of the night. We were actually on a scavenger hunt, and afterwards we went to a party. And at that party, I ended up deciding that, you know, to get from point A to point B, to get to that party, I needed to take a shortcut. A shortcut on going on some railroad tracks. And at that time, I had a little bit of hubris in me. Didn't look at the long game. Didn't look at the consequences. I went on those tracks. I was with some friends. We were spread apart, walking across. Went across the railroad trestle there, slipped over one of the ties. And I fell about 4 stories. Landed right in the river. Now, with the saving grace that I had was the fact that I was conscious that the moment I hit the water. So I had to process the concept of looking down at the tracks one moment and then opening my eyes, and I'm laying in water, partially submerged, freezing cold water, knowing that I'm in trouble. And now how was I going to process the fact that I'm walking one moment and then I'm in the water looking at the tracks the next moment? Felt on my legs and tried to move my back. Sharp pain down my back. I knew I was in trouble. I'm thinking to myself, I'm a dead man. I screamed. I screamed loud, screamed hard. 30 seconds, 5 minutes, 30 minutes. I had no idea of concept of time. I was hoping and praying to God that my friends were still in the area. They did hear my voice, which is good news. They had to follow it because they couldn't see me. It was very dark out, about 1 o'clock in the morning. Finally found me, and they knew I was serious and told them what happened. I fell. They immediately ran to a house, nearby house, to use a phone. It's called a landline. I don't know if you folks have ever heard of that. Yeah. It's 1988, back in the day. So we called the ambulance. The ambulance came over immediately. A couple of questions made by the doctors, or excuse me, the paramedics. I answered. They knew I had some type of back injury. They didn't want to cause further damage. They collared my neck. They put a flat board underneath me. Very carefully, they picked me up, brought me inside the ambulance, brought me to the local hospital. Now, this local hospital couldn't take care of my situation. And I'm not knowing that I'm going to be surviving that night and surviving the next day. I didn't know what was in store for me. They actually had me on the phone talking to my mom, because they did find my wallet and they were able to get my phone number. And the first thing I said to my mom was, "I'm sorry." That's the toughest word I ever said in my life, because I knew I screwed up. And so they took me from that hospital, brought me to a level 1 trauma center, which in this case was downtown Chicago, Northwestern Memorial. And on the way there, I never forget this. And by the way, not being in a coma during this whole experience, I guess it's good and bad. It's good because I'm telling you exactly what happened. It's bad because I actually experienced these things that happened. So sometimes it was a little nightmarish for me. But I always believe in paying it forward for my experiences and hopefully to help other people. And a female paramedic that actually took a pin, was giving me a pin poking test to see where I felt and where I didn't feel. And at that point, I had no idea what a spinal cord injury was. I'm thinking it was a major shock to my system. I'm going to get my leg movement hopefully back in the next couple of days, maybe that later that night. Well, I demanded she do that every couple of minutes. And the closer I got to Northwestern, the more bleak my situation became, because that level of movement didn't move down. In fact, to this day, my injury is from my hips on down. I can't walk, run, jump, can't do anything with my legs. And so there was a lot of not only physical situations that I had to deal with, but also mental, emotional, spiritual, etc. They brought me to the hospital, went through this arduous 12-hour operation. They had to remove the vertebrae. Of course, they had to be very careful because they didn't want to touch the spinal cord. In fact, in spinal cord injuries to this day, no cure, by the way. So they had to take the bone out and replace it with bone fragments from my lower left leg and my right hip, formed a new vertebrae, put it back in the spinal column, brought me to intensive care. And through that intensive care, I had a lot of friends and family that were there for me. And through that acronym of FEARS, I'll just start with the last one, is support systems. You know, I don't consider myself a superhero. I consider myself somebody that's getting through the day. I can't get it only on my own, but I need it through my support systems, my friends, my family, my business associates, people that believe in me, people understand that my reputation. And it all started at that point. You know, when I'm a kid, 20 years old, when something like this happens, I don't realize those tools that I have to utilize to make my life just more enriched. People there for me. In fact, I got to tell you one example. My best friend on the planet, we did everything together. After my injury happened, he was vapor. Nowhere to be found. That was one of the worst things that could ever happen in my life. But you know what? In retrospect, it was probably the best thing that ever happened in my life. And it sounds odd, but I knew who that was there for me. I knew who had my back. And the friends that I have in my life today, I consider superheroes because I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for them. That sounds cliche, but it is so important. From that moment on, to understand who was there after an operation, when you wake up and you see your loved ones there 24/7, that enriches your heart. And it does to me this day. It's been 26 years of dealing with being in a wheelchair and being paralyzed, having paraplegic due to the spinal cord injury. But that love, that compassion, and that care brings me a long way. Now, through that intensive care experience, I don't go home. I have to go through what they call a very intensive rehabilitation experience. Now, rehab means different things to different people. In my case, it was physical, it was emotional, it was things that I had to do to get over myself through rehab. They explained what I was going to do and the different types of the physical and the occupational therapy. And you know, I was a big workout guy. I used to bench over 300 pounds, squat over 450, about 500. And by the way, I'm not bragging because it was really interesting. The first day when they gave me the test to see what my agility was, they gave me a 2-pound dumbbell. I kind of laughed. I said, okay, I'll take this and no big deal. Just give me the 20-pound or 30-pound and do some curls with that. Well, I got to tell you, I did reps. I was up to the 8th rep on the 2-pound, not 20, 2-pound. I couldn't get to the 9th. I had no energy, no endurance, no strength, nothing there. And that was a pivotal moment that I have many doubts that I wouldn't be prepared to not only even get through that day, but to actually get through rehab and have my end goal as becoming independent. Because that's all we want in life, is to be independent and not only help ourselves, which is number one, but we can help other people. I couldn't even help myself. So I had the team of the nurses, the doctors, physical therapists, occupational therapists. And by the way, with the wheelchair, people see that I can't walk, but it does go beyond that when it comes to the spinal cord injury. You know, I mean, this is an adult audience, so I can throw it out there. And by the way, you might feel a little uncomfortable in this, and I kind of don't care. Being funny, by the way. Thank you, got the laugh out of there. So, we deal with bowels, we deal with bladder, we deal with sexual function. Yes, the S word. In fact, it was funny because my buddy would literally call me up in the morning, and for the men out there, you know, when you get up in the morning and certain things happen, it's part of a human physiology. It is what it is. So he would literally call me up first thing every morning. Dale, did it happen? Next morning, Dale, did it happen? Next morning, Dale, did it happen? About 3 weeks later, I beat him in the punch. I'm like, dude, guess what happened? Good times. But that was the new world for me. To learn how to use a catheter. I never used a catheter before in my life. I just went to the bathroom and that was it. So there were things that I really had to mind my own body. Occupational therapy. Now, physical therapy, I worked every day, 6 days a week, in building my upper body to compensate for my lower body. But then comes the major focus. The focus comes in actually how you're going to utilize those skills and having the endurance and having the strength and having the power. Because I went from 200 pounds, the injury and the trauma of the injury, I went down to 155. I had no muscles, it was skin and bone, so I had to build that back up. Not to look all buff in public and have the girls check me out or whatever. Hey, how you doing? It was to do simple functional things in life. Think about it. The first part of the day till the time you go to bed, I had to learn how to do things differently. Here's an example. Clothes. Am I right in saying that probably takes you folks about 3, 4, maybe 5 minutes to put your clothes on? It took me 45 minutes. Now, go on that nutty thing called the internet and find out in the Guinness Book of World Records of how many F-bombs were thrown in a 45-minute period of time. That was me. You want to talk about frustrating? I'm a young 21-year-old man that can't even put his clothes on his own. I didn't want it done today. I wanted it done yesterday. Patience is a virtue. They say it for good reason. It's a very acquired taste. And to utilize that focus to deal with those baby steps in order to get up and lift myself up to long sit in the bed, to move my legs over, to lift myself onto the wheelchair, to put my shoes on. And by the way, I can put my shoe on. I did shower today, so don't worry about that. No scent. You know, I got to put the shoe on and get my feet in between the soles so my feet don't crunch up, and so I have to have a pressure sore, because the last thing I want to have is a pressure sore. It happened to me one time when I was riding a horse. Pressure sore was only about a nickel dime size. It took 3 or 4 months to heal, changing bandages 3 times a day. Even though I don't use these, I have to mind them every moment of the day. You know, Christopher Reeve, the guy that played Superman for us older folks, he passed away from pneumonia. That was complications due to pressure sores. So I need to have focus in every moment of my life. And I have to be deliberate in every task that I do during the course of any day. And in order to have that laser focus, I needed to have energy. I needed to have the positive attitude and the resilience. I had to build that resilience up inside me. I remember one time when I was in the rehab, there was this guy that visited us. He was actually the first Paralympian that was on a box of Wheaties. His name was Doug Ayer. This guy was a quad. His level of injury was a C6 or C5. This guy was benching 400 pounds. This guy can't even grab a fork to eat, and this guy's lifting a serious amount of weight. And I'm thinking to myself, he just automatically inspired me, not just because of the weight that he was lifting, but the resilience he had to modify and to adapt his life in order to be an athlete and do things of that magnitude. Blew my mind. I had no idea about the Paralympians out there. I'm thinking to myself, I'm in a wheelchair, I'm feeling sorry for myself, I'm never going to do sports ever again. You'd be shocked to see how many adaptive programs that are all out there. And so going through rehab, it was only a finite amount of time. I had to have a discharge date, but I needed to do certain things to get to that discharge date. I needed to be completely independent. I had to do things on my own. I had to make sure that I could live my life where I'm living on my own and not be dependent on nursing care or other people in my life when it comes to my physical well-being. I had to make sure that I was taking care of myself. And that was a tough thing to do, because physically, yes, I could do it, but emotionally, getting on that road of being in this very forgiving atmosphere of a hospital, everything at your beck and call is very wheelchair accessible, to a university. And by the way, Northern Illinois is a heck of a lot better than in 2015 than it was in 1989. Not only actually the accessibility part, but going back to school also. Because if you folks have heard of the psychologist out there, I believe she was in the 50s or 60s, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She talked about the 5 stages of grief: anger, denial, depression, bargaining, acceptance. We all go through it as humans when we deal with some type of traumatic experience. I dealt with that too. I'm not a robot, I'm still a human. Difference was that having that positive support group, I had that underlying goal of people that really wanted me to do more things in my life, to be fulfilled and not just collecting money off the government and not surviving, but thriving. Think about those different words. It's a whole world of difference there. Surviving and thriving. You know, our only limitations, in my mind, our limitations are the only ones that are self-imposed. Remember that in any task that you do during the course of the day. Drama, I talk about attitude. That's one of the letters in the acronym, FEARS. Attitude not only goes with yourself, attitude goes with the people around you. I've taken a certain amount of experience and energy of taking the negative part of my life and putting that to the side and looking at the journey ahead of me with the positive influences in my life, those superheroes that help me get from here to here. Because taking that hero's journey when I was here and then all of a sudden having the injury and trying to get back up onto that peak, which, by the way, I'm still there, it takes a lot of time, and those positive people have really elevated that for me. And so we all have that in our lives when it comes to negativity. And those people, whether they be friends or family or associates. First time I learned that experience is when I went back to school. So having those underlying goals of really getting back in my life, even though this is the new world, I needed to be back where I needed to thrive and not just survive. I needed to get back to school. Now, my injury happened December of '88. I was in rehab of '89. You can do the math. You can figure out how old I am, so that's fine. Went back to school that August. Well, I was so anxious in anticipation of doing that I was just excited, but I didn't understand the negative aspect of it. And there was a negative aspect. I went back into my fraternity house, lived with the same guys, met some new guys that became friends and lifelong friends in my life. But all of a sudden, I started going to class, and you know what happened? People started staring. I thought I had thick skin. I thought that I can conquer the world. I had everybody staring at me. Back then, there were hardly anybody that were in wheelchairs at Northern that was always out and about. I was one of the only ones, believe it or not. Things, I'm sure, are a little different these days. People looking at me awkward. Are they worried about approaching me? They heard the story. They know what happened. They're worried about saying anything. They think they're going to make me cry. A lot of different emotions. And so I went back home to my apartment that night, and I cried. I cried for 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't even remember. And if I didn't have those friends there to understand, not understand, but really be there in dealing with my experience and my pain and help me out, I would have never built up that thick skin. That was the impetus of not only getting through school, but also getting through the rest of my life. And on that continuous journey through business and everything. We need to have a thick skin. Not only that, but we need to horse blinders when it comes to that negative energy. I go to the grocery store, I go do a presentation, I'm always out and about, I'm traveling, I guarantee half the people are staring at me. But you know what? It doesn't register because of that laser focus that I talked about before. We have a lot of things that we need to accomplish in life. We can't worry about that pettiness. It's incredibly important to me, and I know it's important to you too. We're all superheroes. We have these attributes inside me, inside us. And how are we going to utilize those attributes to help not only ourselves and to others? Now, I've been a keynote speaker for a couple of years. I've been along to this organization called Think First Injury Prevention. What we do is we go to high schools and middle schools, and we talk about preventing spinal cord and traumatic brain injuries by making sound decisions. So to this point, I've talked to maybe 60, 70,000 students. And I made a decision, and this is another thing with the focus, energy, attitude, resilience, and support systems. All of those attributes help me not only build the confidence inside me, but really understand where my passion needed to be. Now, I've been a mortgage banker for the last 25 years. But I got to tell you, with my charity aspect and working with this Think First Injury Prevention program, it made me realize that, you know what, paying it forward and helping other people understand what kind of values and things that they had inside them, that they're just waiting to explode. But it's up to them. You know, Simon Sinek, if you folks know it out there, he's been in a lot of TED Talks. He says, you know, when you start a business or do anything in life, the first question is, you ask why. Why are you doing it? My why is to pay it forward. Now, by the way, I like the traveling, I like the free food, don't get me wrong. But, right? I mean, come on, let's be honest. It's helping people. And I believe that's the main reason that we are on this planet, to help others and to be superheroes for each other. And now what I'd like to do is maybe show a clip of one of the obsessions, not only likes, because remember I told you about the adaptive programs that are out there? I go to a specific one called the National Ability Center that's in Park City, Utah. And one of the sports is actually downhill skiing. And what I do is I utilize those spheres, the focus, the energy, the attitude, the resilience, the support systems, to excel on something that I truly enjoy. And if you could play the video, that'd be great. And I'll explain what's going on. My buddy Bill's in the audience here too, and he's the character that filmed this. This is on top of Park City Mountain. The reason it's so cloudy there, because, well, it's cloudy. And we're on top of the mountain. It's about 10,000 feet up. Now, what I'm on right now is called a monoski. So it's a bucket that you sit in, suspended by, I know it's pretty crazy stuff, shock absorber on top of one ski. Now, what I'm holding are outriggers, which are poles and skis in the bottom of it. And what I'm utilizing is a lot of power. So when you're on top of the mountain, if the visibility is better, the view is just majestic. It is fantastic. But when I'm going on that mountain, I have no idea what is going on, because I have that uber focus on exactly what I need to do to traverse right and left. And that's just one specific sport, one specific maneuver. So I use that laser focus. I use that energy, because I'm going to tell you, I had to work out a good couple of months before that to build up my endurance. Because that arm power, when you're going down a 10,000-foot mountain, and by the way, we average probably 2 or 3 times any given day, and lifting ourselves on the ski lift and getting up on the mountain, going down, that takes a certain amount of energy. And the attitude, I want to do it, and nothing's going to stop me. So I utilize that attitude and resilience to get up on that darn mountain. But not only that, but I have support systems, because you know what? That looked like a pretty good run right there. I dump like everybody else. But how am I going to get back up? I get back up with the help of my friends. And that comes back up when it comes to my personal life as well as my business life. So anything that you do in life and utilizing these attributes, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be able to overcome every fear. Thank you so much.